Wilpers. Very excited to be with you today here with Coach Jason Lakritz. Jason is a Team Wilpers coach, doctor of physical therapy, and owner of Pro Functional Physical Therapy, an incredibly talented runner. As today's conversation really regarding a lot about the marathon, I think it's worth noting that Jason has a current marathon best time of 2 hours and 36 minutes, as well as a half marathon PR of a blistering 68 minutes. Not too shabby.
Yeah, thanks, John.
Well, Jason, thank you very much for being here. I was just giving Jason a little bit of a heads up. People who have been kind of in this format of our all access presentations before might know that sometimes I jump in and I try to ask some of our coaches specific questions that I want to make sure we touch on that are part of the topic of the day. But the questions that have come up from the group so far were super clear, super applicable, and really important with the proximity of the Chicago Marathon and New York City Marathon 4 weeks away. So I like to throw out a caveat that I feel like I hear on a lot of running podcasts, which is we're going to talk a lot about marathon, the taper week going into it. But if you have a plan that's ready for Sunday and your training is done, take it all with a grain of salt because we're not trying to reinvent the wheel here heading into the weekend. So there might be some little teeny things you can take with you, but especially if your key race is Chicago or just another race this Sunday, is be very thoughtful. We'll do our best to make sure to guide you well. So we're going to jump right in. Our first question that came from the group here was, this person is in week 14 of 18 and said, feels like all I'm doing is running. Strength training and even upper body is tough to fit in. Some of that is just life things, but even with life things, I feel I need to maximize recovery between runs. Is this a good place to be? I do yoga to aid recovery, feeling really good on the run, just feel like my well-rounded practice has become less well-rounded. So in kind of reframing this a little bit, Jason, so I'm sure you faced this as an athlete. I guarantee you faced it as a coach. When running becomes like all consuming in an athlete's schedule, are there things that you do to try to balance the supplemental work that goes along with it, especially in a process like the marathon where you have to be so respectful of the volume?
So and like you said, the volume for a marathon is very important. And at this time, week 14 or 16 or 17 week of a training plan, you're going to be running a lot of miles. Just part of the fact of the thing. So that's why it's really important. I think outside of those times that you're doing a lot of other stuff. So meaning like weeks 1 through 10, you're doing a lot of cross training and strengthening and that kind of stuff. So those last 3 or 4 weeks when you're doing a lot of running, you doing less of that stuff is going to be okay. If you can, because you can't fit in, 2 strength training classes and a 20-mile run and a 10-mile workout all in the same week. It's just not going to happen. But you do have to prioritize those longer runs, longer workouts during those periods of time. It's more about trying to make sure your life outside of that particular 4-week period is well-rounded and well done. That particular time is not going to be well-rounded. A marathon is not a well-rounded thing. It's just not going to happen. If you want to do your best marathon time during those peak weeks, you're going to do a lot of running. Doesn't mean you can't do strength training or that kind of stuff, but it's going to be less. Like, if you did strength training with, 10-pound weights or whatever it is for the first 10 weeks, during that time, you might be only body weight. And if you do it for 30 minutes, you might be doing it for 15 minutes. It's going to be less. That's just part of the game.
Yeah, and I would say I feel like this happens to athletes at every level as well, right? Like all the way from first-time marathoners to professional. You talk about the periodization effect of it, and as you're getting closer to your race, you're ramping up running and you're moving somewhere else. And kind of the nice, maybe nice, maybe not. If you're in week 14 of 18, you're only a few weeks from off season, so might be that time just to keep push through a little bit, and then when you come through into that off season, Jason, I'd be interested to hear your opinion. But certainly with a lot of my athletes, we really are flipping the switch and kind of pulling off of volume, starting to push some things that they were maybe doing or enjoyed doing before we got to the peak of marathon training.
For sure, yeah. So post marathon, take your time off. I tell my athletes 2 weeks off of nothing, which is always met with backlash, but not necessarily nothing, but no running anyway. That's the times when you start to plan your other stuff to come back. In terms of strength training, you want to build the strength training back up. Even in terms of if you're just a runner, just running different types of workouts. Not going to do long runs, do fast stuff. Instead of doing 14-mile tempo runs, you're doing 400-meter repeats type of stuff. And if you like swimming, but you couldn't do it for the last 2 months because you were marathon training, that's when you swim and build that back up. Same thing with biking and whatnot. But definitely after the marathon, for sure, get back into everything you're doing before. And running should really be put on the back burner for a while.
Yeah. And just looping the tiniest bit back, Jason, because I know you kind of mentioned, this particular instance was very late into the marathon training process.
Yeah.
But for your athletes, like kind of week 0 to 10, do you kind of do you push kind of a combination of supplemental work so it's not all run, or
it depends. So it depends on that person. In terms of cross training in different ways, in terms of different cardio events, it really depends on what the person likes. I really let the person do what they really like to do. If they're truly just a runner and they like to run, then we'll probably do mostly running. But then during those weeks, there'll be lots of different strength training things to supplement that running, right? You want to make sure you're doing your yoga or your Pilates or your wherever, Peloton strength training for abs and core and all that kind of stuff for that. And you should have time and energy in your system to do that in those first few weeks. But yeah, if somebody likes biking, then yeah, they could do some biking. They like swimming, do swimming. But I don't push necessarily a cardio thing that somebody doesn't want, doesn't like.
Yeah, I have a feeling that you'll be in the same camp as me, but it's so funny when people are like, should I do blank, blank, and blank? And I'm like, yeah, but you could just do more running. It's so much better.
Yeah, I mean, people ask me all the time, do you do cross training? I don't like biking. I don't like swimming. I actually don't mind. I like rowing. I do some rowing, but I generally like to run. I mean, that's what I do. That's what I've always done. So I run, but my supplemental work is the stretching and strengthening and the mobility work to try to not overuse my muscles.
Yeah. I think maybe just to cap this question off here, to your point, it just is really dependent upon the athlete. So I think there are these conversations a lot about the need for supplemental training, the need for cross training. And while I think that's important for a lot of athletes, I think the point you brought up that it's, on a very case by case basis. What I don't like necessarily for people to walk away from these kind of conversations is thinking that an all running schedule is a bad schedule. If you have a body that's resilient to it and holds up and does all those miles, then you want to run 5-6 days a week, then outstanding. Yeah, kind of, as you mentioned, the kind of strength training component, the mobility component is that might be your supplemental training there, but can be a great thing if you're having fun with it and your body's holding up for it, just in the same way that a schedule with mixed exercise, mixed modalities can also be successful for a lot of athletes.
Yeah, for sure. And if athletes are trying to come through injuries and that kind of stuff, that's a different conversation. But you'll need something to help increase volume without pounding your body. But,
yeah, great way to leave it. So it's kind of an interesting question here next, and many of the questions that came up today, I was like, man, I'm really excited to hear Jason's opinion. I've got my own opinions, but they've very rarely been checked. So the question here was, any advice for out of town runners flying in for a destination race? We know it happens all the time. You and I are kind of New York City-esque based, so it's kind of nice. A lot of the big races are already right here. Not that there aren't big races everywhere, but I don't have to fly a lot for races. But a lot of people are flying all over the globe right now. So any suggestions for people flying in for destination races?
Yeah, the biggest one is actually not physical at all. It's more about how you carry your stuff with you. So my coach, when I was in college, would tell me every time we went on a flight to make sure you pack all your stuff on your carry-on. Because if you didn't and you pack your spikes and your racing stuff on your check bag, it doesn't get there, you're kind of out of luck. You don't want to do anything new on race day, right? So you don't want to buy new shoes and new shorts and all kind of stuff if they didn't get there. So
Mhm.
a piece of advice that has nothing to do with training, but just general knowledge is definitely pack your stuff on a carry-on, and if you still need the check bag, just put on your other stuff there. But definitely pack all your racing shoes, your socks, your whatever running stuff you want to use is on there, and even your gels and all kinds of stuff. Pack that with you. Take it with you. Don't let that go to chance. Outside of that, more physical things, which I think what you're talking about.
No,
Uh,
that's great. I mean, a great tip. That's one, yeah. Especially the race shoes. I never leave them in the check
yeah, the race
bag
shoes you
for race.
you gotta take them with you. But in terms of physically, like hydration, obviously is important. People get dehydrated easily. Uh, there's all these like things like drink a liter of water for every hour you're up. There's like all these different kind of things. But drink a lot. Don't worry, get up and pee if you have to. It's fine. But definitely drink a lot when you're on the plane. Hydration. That most of the time that tired feeling you get from getting off the plane is because you're dehydrated. The plane goes up there, you're high up in the air, the air is dry. It's just part of the thing. So definitely hydrate well. With electrolytes, with Noon, with whatever you use. But definitely hydrate well. In terms of also nutrition wise, eating wise, you do the best you can. Obviously, you're in an airport. What are you gonna do? But you try to eat and eat well. And if you eat candy on the plane, it's gonna feel crappy. Although I like to eat that sometimes. But that kind of stuff. What else is a good tip? Oh, physically, yeah. So moving, getting up and down and moving around. So if you're flying like an hour, it doesn't really matter. It's only an hour sitting down. But if you're flying 3 4 hours to somewhere, getting up throughout this flight and moving around can be very beneficial. So if you're, don't worry about moving the person in the aisle or whatever. Just walk them down the lane and get some movement in. Then when you land, I like going for a run when I land. Short little run, very short,
Mhm.
like 15 20 minutes,
Yep.
just to kind of flesh the legs out and move around.
Great. Yeah, I saw a stat recently when I was trying. It was through a travel publication. I was talking about the hydration in air. They said the stat that they gave was that you were losing 8 ounces of fluid per hour in the airplane. So in addition to the daily needs that you already have. So it's funny. At the time, I was on my way back from Greece. So I was flying. I had about I can't remember maybe 8 9 hours of airtime, something like that. I was looking at. I found it very difficult to try to make up that 8 ounces of water per hour over that time when they were only giving like half of a 4 ounce
Yeah,
glass of water. So definite reminder. It's like don't depend upon what is on the plane. It's hard to track that down. If you're going to run key races, make sure to travel with bottles. As Jason said, great opportunity if you have to get up and go to the bathroom to be a little bit more mobile. But in particular, you're thinking about those long flights. Yeah, you can come off very dehydrated, which is hard to bounce back from. You don't just like bounce back in a couple hours. It can take 24, 48. So if you're coming in on a Friday or a Saturday morning to run a Sunday race, you got to be thoughtful about that, really thoughtful during the process. Jason, I'd be curious, just your opinion. Like, do you have your athletes, or you personally do anything with compression or rubs, creams, etc.?
in terms of like flying,
Yeah.
uh, compression can be good. So it depends. I don't have. If you tend to swell, like if your feet swell or something like that, then having wearing compression sleeves or socks when you're on the plane can be helpful because that's gonna take time to recover after, obviously. So especially if you're flying like Saturday and the race is Sunday,
Hmm.
you might want to do that. But that's to kind of know your body and know how it responds to that because that is more of a case by case basis. Because if you don't need it, then you could wear the compression stuff, but it's not going to do much difference. But if you know that you're one of the people that do swell when you go up in the air, yeah, you want to mitigate that as much as you can, so you don't have to make that up when you land.
Yeah, for sure. Well, cool. Well, I think those are hopefully some handy tips, especially for people who are traveling in the next day or two, but obviously in the weeks to follow as well. So hopefully that's helpful. So move on to our next question here, which is once again another one I was really interested to hear, which is the best kind of workout format slash plan for your last week of taper. So we're talking about weight like race week. So I'm going to kind of reframe this just the tiniest bit. It's, you're in your weeks of training, as you were just talking about. You're doing a lot of running. You're hopefully doing a little bit of like strength training, mobility work. And then obviously you get to your final couple weeks and you start like really dialing it back down. So let's just make an assumption here that you were doing all those good things that we ask our runners to do, which is, a little bit of strength, a little bit of stretch, a lot of bit of running. And all of a sudden you're in your final week, your race week now. Jason, what are you having your athletes do the week of the race?
Yeah, in terms of training, so strength training will go down to very little. They might do one day on like very Sunday, maybe like on Monday or Tuesday. They might do like down the body weight thing. So maybe the same motion they were doing, just only body weight though. Would definitely not load the weight there anymore. Nutritionally, you're gonna start to think about the carb load, which is super important. I don't know if that's a whole different topic, but 2-3 days out, you're gonna start to carb load. And carb loading is a lot more than you might think, which can be fun. But it's like if you're really trying to carb load, it's like 5 more bagels a day than you would want. So bagels, don't do bagels. That's just an example.
Yeah.
But the idea is it's a lot more carbs than you think.
Yeah, we'll go into if it's all right. I know it wasn't quite on our docket, but can you elaborate a little bit
with the carb stuff?
Yeah, on kind of carb loading.
Yeah, so the idea of the carb load is to top your stores off basically. So your body can your organs can hold a certain amount of glycogen, which is what the carbs are, and then your muscles can hold an extra storage of that, I guess. So you're trying to really make sure that all that is as full as possible. And in order to do that, you have to take in a large quantity. So it depends on your size exactly and what race you're doing. If you're doing a marathon, you're like an average size person. I don't want to get exactly a number, but somewhere in like a 500 gram like extra surplus of carbs, which is like there's like 5 more bagels or like
that's a lot.
Like two more, like instead of having 1 bowl of oatmeal, you have like 2 bowls, and then you have the bagel. It's a lot more. You do that for 2 or 3 days. The thing that will get people a lot is that you're gonna feel very bloated. But that's part of the carb load, and that's not a bad thing. Your body's gonna use all that extra. I'll call it bloatiness, I guess. All that extra, what feels like more stuff on you, is going to help you get through the marathon better. And this is for true endurance sports. Like you're not going to do it for a mile race or a 5K. That wouldn't be smart. But for a marathon or more, Ironmans, all those people doing triathlons, you're going to do that carb loading. You're going to feel sort of bad. It feels crappy the first time you do it. But you'll find that you'll have the energy later on as you go. And there's no thing, and they also, there used to be this thing where you had to like deload your carbs first and load the carbs up. Yeah. That's sort of been debunked pretty well. So you don't need to change like on Monday do less carbs, Tuesday less carbs, and Wednesday you are starting to carb it up. You just start the carb. Also, you want to try to do carbs that are less fibrous, especially getting closer to the race. So like fruit and vegetables and all that stuff. They're carbs too. But they're very fibrous, right? You don't want that really in your system as you get closer to the marathon, the GI issues and that kind of stuff. So you're gonna go with like pastas and potatoes and stuff like that.
Yeah. So if you're on like a 2-3 day, for lack of a better term, we'll call it a carb bender here.
Yeah.
Loading up on the non-fibrous carbs. Like where in the week? We'll assume Sunday race. So for Sunday race, is there like a 3-day period of the week you want that push? Or is it like all the way up to race day, or like kind of early in the week and then taper off at all?
No, you're going right up to race day. Right. So you're going carb through race day, and then you have your normal. You're going to have your normal what you practice breakfast that you practice hopefully had on that day, and then going that way. Because if you do a carb load and taper off before the day, you use up some of the stores you just built up.
Sure.
So you really want to go all the way to like Saturday night is your carb load dinner, right? But to that point, right, you're not going to eat like cookies and things like that make you feel really bad. Pretty, you wake up next morning feeling, oh, that feels bad. But if you eat decent carbs, you'll feel bloated, but you'll feel fine.
Okay, gotcha. So cool. So going back to the week, so you're doing
Yeah,
your carb loading, you're reducing down, kind of, if you wouldn't mind
sure.
getting back to like what that week looks like.
Yeah. So then so the race is Sunday. I'm gonna work backwards from the race.
Great.
So the race is Sunday. Usually on Saturday, I usually have most of my athletes do a short shakeout.
Mm-hmm.
15, 20 minutes is kind of what I look for. And then depending on the level of athlete and how much they've done strides in the past, do strides if that's something they've done a lot of during the cycle.
Sure.
If they haven't done strides, don't throw in strides first time, the day before a marathon.
Mm-hmm.
As much as you want to feel fast, that you want to pull a muscle or make yourself sore in any way. But if you've been doing strides, good thing to do a couple strides, 3 or 4 strides. And then backing up from that day, I usually take that day off. So the Friday would be off, and you would do no running, no strength training. Could do your foam rolling and some of the mobility stuff and stretching and just things that get pass the time by kind of thing. But no cardio work. So don't go biking, don't go swimming, none of that. And then we go into like the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of that week. Usually, like Thursday would be an easy run, or if you want to do a cross train thing, you do a cross train thing. But again, 30 minutes kind of max whatever you're doing. Again, easy pace, nothing hard. Usually, a Wednesday would be a small workout, meaning something like 15-minute warm up. 5 times, 1 minute on, 1 minute off. 1 minute on being like marathon pace, 1 minute off. 1 minute on being half marathon pace, 1 minute off being marathon pace. So you're still moving a little bit, but it's only for about 10 minutes, and then 10, 15 minutes cool down, just to get the feel of the marathon in your legs again. But that should be short enough we don't feel any after effects of that. And then Tuesday again would be either a short easy run or a day off or a cross train, depending on what you've been doing.
Great. Yeah, that's pretty much what I would do too. I like to have people refamiliarize themselves with marathon pace and either some sort of, as you said, kind of minute on, minute off, short progression run, something of that nature, and then really scroll down. I think usually I'm shooting for about like 30% of maximum training load that final week, like going into the race. So it's. And exactly what you said. I like if I have an athlete that's strength trained a lot, I'll have them strength trained, but it's just going to be body weight mimicking the motion. It's going to be short early in the week and then really backing off, which all leads to a great question, which was kind of our next question here, which is so plenty of people get into this taper. And I think most people are probably familiar with like the taper crazies, taper phantom pains, where it's you got extra time on your hands, you have extra energy on your hands. Any suggestions on how to kind of combat these, especially like kind of the nerves, the kind of extra anxious energy that you're kind of picking up during this taper period?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is to understand why you're tapering. Like, if you understand sort of why you're doing less, maybe you'll be more okay with doing less. Because all of us, if we train hard, right? We want to train hard. That's what we do. And even you or me, like I like running hard. That's what I do. But if you understand why you're not running hard, maybe that makes it more okay. So the whole point of taper, right, is to kind of get the body to recover from the training cycle. You put in 10, 12, 14, 20, however many, 24 weeks into this training cycle. You built up a lot of training stress over that time. And if you went and did a race right after the last hard workout, your body cannot respond the way it would if it had some rest. So you're not going to run as fast as it could. You could run well, but not as good as it could. So the rest and the taper allows the body to sort of repair its muscles, get the body ready to go, help the muscle stores of glycogen, all that stuff restore. So you're truly at your best for race day. It's why you have a peak. It's why you can't have 2 peaks. People want to try to peak, for Chicago and New York. It's really hard to. You could do both races, but it's hard to peak for both races because it just physiologically it's not going to work, right? You're going to either come down for Chicago and use up everything you got, and then you only have 3 or 4 weeks to build up to New York, and you just can't get 2 big peaks in there. So you're trying to build it to one big peak for your big race. So the rest helps you kind of get there. So in that taper, hopefully you do have more energy. That is a good sign. Hopefully you do feel a little crazy and a little anxious. Again, good signs, and try to think of that as positives, not negatives. The positive of the extra energy. Can you use that energy now? Save it. Like put it in a bottle. Save it for race day. Figure out ways to whatever metaphor you want to use, some kind of metaphor that you're like, hey, I should be running right now. I really want to do it, but let's save it for race day. And that same energy at mile you have now, use it at mile 24 because you're gonna need it. I mean, running a marathon's not easy.
It's not, and it's not. It's funny the amount of times I've seen athletes that are like, I have more time, more energy, so they start picking up. They're like, all of a sudden, like, this is a great time to organize the garage. And I was like,
Yeah,
it's not a great time to organize the garage. That seems like a long, fairly physical process. Like, you
yeah,
somehow have to rein it in here. Like, relax, read a book, do something. You don't have to be bedbound, but it's definitely want to really try to rest the body. She said the marathon is an awfully hard race. That final 10, I have never felt good in the final 10K of a marathon. I'm like 20 some marathons deep. I remember talking to Carly, and she was like, I really like kicked it into gear the final 10K, and I was like, how? Like I
I
usually
mean, discipline, right? If you're really disciplined in the beginning of the race, maybe. But like,
maybe
I always tell people, you don't expect it to feel good the last 10K. Never
no.
expect it. It's always expected to feel terrible. And if it does feel good, great. With Carly's story, right? She expected it to feel terrible. She thought it was like awful.
Yeah.
And she got there and was like, oh, it's not that bad. So then she felt good.
Yeah, she's one strong lady. So I'm gonna order this because it's a perfect transition into what I kind of wanted to talk about. I mentioned to you right before we jumped on, which is
Yeah.
pacing in general. Not many questions about pacing, surprisingly. So this is one I'm throwing in for myself because I find that the pacing of the marathon completely different than every other race distance. And I'll throw my little 2 cents in before I fully turn it over to you because I'm very excited to hear your opinion. Is that every other race distance, all the way through the half marathon, in my opinion, really allows you to go by feel a little bit. Like you have to be pretty thoughtful in all races, even half marathon at pace, not going out too hard, but they really allow an opportunity to sort of do a self correct in a way that the marathon does not. So I like the way that I've heard it broken down many times, which the marathon is in three parts. It's miles 0 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 26.2, which is you have to be trained with your mind for 10 miles, depend upon your training for 10 miles, and depend upon a little heart and grit for the
Yeah.
final 10K. But so now I will actually phrase this in a question for you. I will say, especially as an athlete, let's say, who's kind of nailed this at a very high level. What are your thoughts about pacing on the marathon in particular?
Yeah. So pacing a marathon is the most important thing in your race. Like in a half marathon or 10K or 5K, if you go out too hard, you might die a little bit, but you're going to finish the race fairly well. Even if you run 10 seconds per mile slower than you started, that's not the end of the world. The marathon, you go out too fast, and it could end up being like 2 more hours out there than you thought, type of
Yeah.
thing. So pacing becomes really important. And I guess I'll start with a story of myself, I guess.
Yeah.
Of a bad pacing thing, and just to understand how close it can be, kind of thing. So I ran New York City in 2011, which is now a long time ago. But I ran that in 2011. It was my third marathon, I believe, and I was probably in the best shape I've ever been in for a marathon. But I'm just gonna throw the goals out there. Don't worry about what the actual time was. But I was wanting to run 2:25 ish for the race, and that's about 5:35 per mile or so. And my first mile was good up the hill, which makes it easier to go slow.
Mhm.
I ran like 5:40, which is awesome. The second mile was going down Verrazano, and I thought I was like walking backwards, kind of thing. And it was a 5:06 mile, and I was being passed everybody, and like I was trying to slow down, but 5:06 is way too fast for my level. And that 1 mile probably didn't kill my race, But then I proceeded to run the next half marathon at 5:25 pace. So 5:25 only sounds 10 cents per mile faster, but that's a chunk faster than I was trained for. So I went through the half, in about 5:25 pace, and then I got to about mile 21 or so. Still running like 5:30, something in that range. Then my whole body just like cramped up, just like everything just stopped working. I ended up running. Took me like 50 minutes to do the last 5 miles or something like that. So it was a pretty harsh, like,
which is not so bad for most of us, but that's about a 100% reduction from where you were.
Yeah. So like the way I put it in context, because people are, oh, well, it's not that slow. But you put it in context, I ran the first 20 in an hour and 50 minutes. I ran the last 10K in 57 minutes or something. So it was something like really crazy like that. So I was like pretty, hurting a lot. But I do think that the pacing that messed me up was the 10 seconds per mile faster I was consistently throughout the first part. So when I tell people how to pace for a marathon, you could have your goals or whatever, you figure out paces to run. But it's important to, one, trust what you're feeling, not the people around you per se, but trust what you're feeling. And when you go out, better go out too slow and too fast. Meaning, like, people always tell me, like, I went out in a marathon, I thought I was going really slow, but I was afraid to go too slow, so I went faster. Like, no. In a marathon, if you feel like going too fast, too slow down. You can't mess up your race by running even 30 seconds slower per mile than you want to the first mile. And you won't run that much slower. It's impossible. You won't run that much slower. But if you run, like, your goal is to run 10-minute miles and your first mile is 10:10 or 10:15, great. 10:30, even 10:30, awesome. If it's 9:30, then you're starting to get into that territory, oh crap. Like, now you need to really back off. If you continue to do 9:30, 9:30, 9:30, 9:30, that's when you start to feel that later on in the race. You can feel amazing, especially in a race like Chicago or New York, where like the crowds are crazy and adrenaline's flowing. You're gonna feel like that first half marathon in New York City I ran, easiest 1:11 I ran in my life. Just like I was like floating on the ground. But it didn't matter, right? I still had to run another 13 miles. So you gotta really check yourself and move yourself and understand that whatever pace you train for, you really gotta make sure you're there or a little bit slower in the beginning. To allow yourself to kind of do that. And I guess a good thing about Chicago to mention, just because it's happening, and New York, to tell you the truth, the GPS stuff is not very good to use. It's going to be funky and messed up. It's going to throw you off. Switch your thing to manual mode or use the manual watch or something. Just click off the mile markers to see what pace you're going. It'll be much easier, and you'll be much more trust what you're seeing. Because you're going to see on your watch, they say, oh, I'm going 12-minute miles or 9-minute miles or 7-minute miles. You have no idea. So Chicago, manually lap it. But anyway, so I usually tell people the first 5K, if your goal is to run 10-minute per mile pace for the whole marathon, 10:10, 10:15, maybe 10 flat at the end of that. That's kind of what you're trying to get to. Find the feel for that. After 5K, you should have a feel for what you're running. And then you can kind of fall into your pace a little bit more from 5K to usually I try chunking out to like the half marathon or so. And just to kind of check in a half marathon. All right, how am I feeling? Do you think I can make it further? Do I need to keep the pace? Can I pick up a little bit? Do I need to slow down a little bit? Kind of check yourself there. Then I like go into like mile 18 as the next checkpoint. Like, hey, at mile 18, same thing. Can I go faster? Do I need to slow down? Do I need to stay the same? And then you can pick your own checkpoints. Then I do 20, 5K to go, finish. That's usually my kind of checkpoints in my head.
Yeah. The only kind of exactly to your point, it's funny. Your story made me think of not one of my own stories where I've poorly paced the marathon, but when I paced a runner actually like in the year that the marathon was off here in New York City due to COVID, but they wanted to run the race and we try to make it as serious as possible. And it was his first marathon. I remember we were running and we were, miles 0 to 10 and the temperature was nice. He looked good. We were feeling good. And, I kept asking him, I was like, how you doing? How you doing? And he's like, I feel fine. We got to that second section, 10 to 20. And I could tell that he was starting to like hurt a little bit. And I was, we keep asking like, how you doing? He's like, I feel okay. I feel okay. And as we were getting a little bit deeper, it was starting to get quiet, which, is not a great sign. And I was trying to kind of talk to him a little bit. I was like, you should probably back it off, which is not always a very encouraging thing to say in the middle of a race. So, I try to be thoughtful there. But I think something so important is that you are supposed to feel good at 0 to 10. 0 to 10,
Mhm.
you should feel awesome. 10 to 20, you should still feel good, which is interesting because most people peak around 20-ish miles for training, and that's, I mean, it is a huge achievement. You have to reach the 20-mile marker of the marathon feeling pretty solid because you still have 10K to go. So that's just something, this is something obviously could be incorporated maybe even in the week ahead, but if you're, mile 6, 7, 8 and starting to like feel a struggle, you're way too fast. You got to pull it way back down, because you need to be feeling good at mile 20, 21, 22, uh, and being able to still be, conversational, having your body respond to you. So it really pays as Jason was saying, be pretty darn conservative at the start. And, if you get to mile 23 and just feel like burning out the last 5K, like what a great problem to have.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they saw you see Emmy's race in Berlin.
I didn't see the splits. I know
Yeah.
she had a good run.
So yeah, she was super conservative in the beginning, but then like destroyed the last 10K.
Uh,
But so like it also feels better to do that. If you ever run a race, uh, the way I convince people to run negative splits is to do it at some point. And when you do it, it just feels so much better
yeah,
to finish well than to kind of claw your way to the finish line,
uh,
especially in a marathon.
for sure. So this is, I think, a good pivot to actually. I'm all out of order now, but this is actually playing out perfectly. Which is, I mentioned most people kind of peak in and around the 20-mile range. Some people a little bit higher, some people a little bit less. And this question was that they're running their first NYC marathon and curious how they're supposed to pull an extra 6.2 miles out when the longest run is only 20. So I was kind of curious if you would talk a little bit about, the ideology of maxing out a training cycle, kind of short of the actual long run distance, kind of why you do it, and how you bridge that gap on race day to cover that extra 10K.
Yeah, so I think the longest single run I like people to do, it depends a little bit on pace and what you're doing. If you're run walking a marathon, I might have you go longer than the 3 hour kind of thing because you're run walking, right? So your running time will probably still be around 3 hours, but the overall time of the thing might be 4 hours or so. But in terms of running, 3 hours, 3 hours, 15 minutes, maybe 3:30. So most of people do in one run for a few reasons. One, the benefit you get physiologically from running more than that is so small, and the chance of injury goes up so high, and the ability to recover is so hard that it doesn't. If you're gonna run 4 hours or 5 hours, do that in race day. Don't do it leading up to race day. It's hard to recover from that and continue training. So people people that run like the 10-minute mile people are harder sometimes because they're not gonna run 20 miles in 3 hours. That's not gonna happen. And they always want to run. They heard I need to run 20 miles. I need to run 20 miles no matter what. Well, sure, there's other ways you get to 20 miles, right? You can do a 10-mile Saturday run and a 10-mile Sunday run or something like that, right? You can do back-to-back days. You could do things where you cross train super hard one morning or one day and then run hard the next day. There's ways you can get around that. And your overall goal of training is not to prove to yourself that you've done enough. It's to train a system in your body, right? Meaning like you don't need to prove to yourself you can do it. You need to train the system in your body to be able to do it. If that makes sense. So by running 3 hours, you're training the system really well. You're running 4 hours, you're going overboard for no reason but to give yourself confidence that you can do it. You gotta figure out a way to give yourself belief without that component. Because if you don't, you're gonna overtrain and then you're gonna feel worse on race day anyway. So back to the 3 hours is sort of like my governing sort of like around there. I want you to stop in one run, and then again we'll do two runs around it. Or somehow we'll figure out a way to get to a little bit more time. But you still aren't around the time that you would in a marathon. But what you do in terms of training, you're training your systems, right? So over the week, you're going to run a certain amount of time during the week, which will accumulate fatigue, which will let you do the 20-mile run or 3 hour run fatigued, then you go into your taper. Now you got an important part about the taper. Now you go into a taper, you get everything becomes much more balanced. You feel much better. So then you go into that marathon fully recharged versus being fatigued into your 20-mile run. So your body can now, be able to connect all those training cycles or training mini cycles to be able to finish the last 10K. It's not gonna be easy. Don't think it's gonna be easy to finish the last 10K. It's gonna be hard, but you'll be able to do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the way I've tried to describe in the past, because feel like this 3-ish hour cap has become like more prevalent, more talked about in recent years than it used to be, where it always was just like get to the distance. But has so much to do with like can't wipe you out in the middle of training. If all of a sudden a workout takes 6 days to recover from, that was a bad workout, because what we need you to do is be consistently training more often. So we need you to long run. Then I need you. Maybe you get a day off, but then you're back the next day. We're back to it. So once again, it takes half a week to bounce back from an individual session. That was a bad workout. And when you're getting up in that high distance, we're going into glycogen deprivation mode, where your body is starting to kind of eat its own muscle. Like, it's a reason, Jason said earlier, take 2 weeks off after your marathon. When if you're putting in 24, 25, like you're up there, like putting in, even anything over 3+ hours, you're really like kind of dancing with disaster up there, because that's a tough, hard, long workout. You don't want to do it very often. And, as Jason said, I usually save it for race day and make a big push. But now I can't even remember where I first heard this, but it made most sense to me was I got likened to ultramarathon running, which is, if you're a runner that's training for a 100-miler, you don't train that by going out and running 90 miles. You probably have a max run somewhere around like 50K, unless you're doing like a 50-miler, 100K along the way. Like, most of your weekend training miles are going to be between 20 and 30 miles. But you're preparing to run 100. And once again, just as Jason said, is you're training an energy zone. And you can't go out and do those huge runs because it just takes too much out of you. So you got to train for the endurance and then rest up utilizing these tapers and really kind of, put it all out there on one individual session.
Yeah, another way that I like to talk about it a little bit in terms of like using too much energy in one session is a lot of people like to race a half marathon like 4 weeks from the marathon. Mm-hmm. If you truly race a half marathon 4 weeks from a marathon, you're going way too hard. Your body takes a whole week to recover from racing a half marathon. So you just lost so even though you ran 13 miles really hard, you probably lost out on running 20 miles at your marathon pace next week. So then you're not able to build your training up. So even with racing, I tell people you don't want to do any kind of racing that close to the marathon either, even though it's shorter and you want to get confidence and that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. You do have marathons, but do them at marathon pace or some version of that. But you don't want to go and race a hard half marathon. There's so many people that have run the New York City half really well and totally bomb Boston. And part of it's because they ran a really hard New York City half marathon. They just didn't recover enough time to run Boston. Yeah. They're both really hard races.
Well, that's in New York City. We have the same thing. So I think Staten Island half should be this weekend.
Right. So Staten Island half, which a ton of people do, which is great. You do it as a training run, but don't try to PR or, go to the well so much there. You're trying to use it as a race simulator and feel out marathon pace. The best way to feel out marathon pace is do it in a shorter race, because you feel like you're going really slow. It's a way to kind of test yourself. Say, can I still keep my pace even though it feels like I'm literally walking? And then hopefully you do, but it's a good way to practice that.
Well, let me get one more question here. So we're kind of running out of your time. I know you're probably treating patients the rest of the day, I have to imagine here.
Not morning patients, but yeah.
Okay, fair. So kind of a fun question here. I honestly wasn't that sure what the answer was, but I was curious to hear your opinion. So this person asked kind of best practices for, they said 4 to 5 hour car ride home after their marathon, but thought it opened it up a lot. I'm sure you've known a zillion people run the race, either jump straight in their car, head straight to the airport, and are flying. So for those runners post race that are, have extended travel ahead, any kind of tips? Let's go a little move over to your PT scope here a tiny bit of like
Yeah, for
how to
sure.
best kickstart that recovery.
Yeah, I mean, so we're talking ideals here. Obviously, like everybody has their situation, but ideally, you would eat something pretty soon. Hopefully, you want to eat. I mean, I always want to eat. And you'd be surprised. Actually, the best things to eat like immediately after is the simple sugar things. You want things to get into your system real fast. So like eating like a graham cracker type thing or something like or a pancake or something kind of sugary is actually really good to eat right away. Or you want to go a healthy way, like a fruit smoothie type of thing.
Hmm.
Some with some simple sugars, some juice in there. You can throw some protein, all that stuff to help kind of get the stuff going on. But you want to get something in your system quickly, another gel or whatever you want to do. Something in there super fast. Even if you feel sick, figure out something you get in there. It will help start the recovery process. Then if you have to travel, right, you don't want to just jump in the car and travel. Do some sort of movement. I'm not call it stretching because you won't be able to stretch because I can't move after a marathon. But do some kind of movement where you're like not moving forward and back. Do move, like walk sideways, walk backwards. I don't know. Try to swing your leg a little bit if you can. Bend over if you can. I usually can't bend over at all. After the last marathon, my dad had to tie my shoes. I couldn't like tie my shoe. But move, walk. Do something before you get right in the car. Doesn't be a lot, just something. And again, ideally, if you're like, if you have to fly, actually flying's good, right? You fly, you're hydrating, obviously, but you get up every couple of minutes or every half hour and move around. If you're driving, yeah, ideally, if you're driving 4 or 5 hours, stop at a rest stop every hour or so and get up and move around. Hopefully, you don't have like a super deadline to get to, and it can take you 6 or 7 hours to get home instead of 5 hours. But you get up and move around more. The key to not feeling terrible is to be able to get fluid flow through your muscles. So movement is the best way to do that. So being able to move some way is what you're trying to look for. If you're in the car and you can't get out of the car, straighten your legs out, bend your knees up, do something. If you have like floss bands, floss band your legs, do you know what those are?
Oh
Like
yeah, sure.
yeah, like the compression band things, get them going. Anything you can think of to get some kind of fluid going through your legs would make sense. But again, movement's the best thing for you. So if you figure out a way to move within those 4 or 5 hours, it's the best you can do.
Yeah, I think that's it. And then on the flip side, I don't know about you, but you're done, so just do whatever.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. Do whatever you don't just sit all day.
Yeah,
But besides that, do whatever you feel like you want to drink some beer. Go ahead and the beer's moving, right?
well, that's it. I sure like it. I think, especially these big weekends, Chicago, New York, the suggestions I give to people, it's like put the metal on. Well, let me rephrase because yes, eating is the first thing I have people do. I always want to go straight to bed. You wake up the crack of dawn. It's a long day. Like I want a nap, but then when I get up, I like want to get out and I want to walk around. The last thing I like people do is like head straight to the couch. But I think even if you're driving, kind of to your point, Jason, it's like don't waddle your way from finish shoot straight to the car, sit down, like go 5 hours straight and walk inside. It's really spend some time like moseying around the finish line area. Have warm clothes. You could become like an icicle at the end of these big races. If you're not familiar, your body temp is plunging from being elevated for 3 hours. So like it can still be 70 degrees out, but you might need a parka to like feel good outside. So like overdress for the warmth at the end. Stay a little bit mobile. One more time, as Jason said, get food, calories into your body, lickety split. Be careful with the alcohol. It can
Yeah.
go a few different ways there. But yeah, for people who are flying, for people who are driving, I think another great suggestion of Jason's is try everything you can to like get out and move around a little bit, and then maybe just the kind of my final little suggestion there is when you reach your destination, maybe that's not necessarily the time to come to a dead stop. It's get that marathon on, get that marathon medal around your neck, get, changed in warm clothes and get out, walk around a bit, take the dog out, take a stroll with friends, not for miles, not quickly, but just, keep mobile. It's going to help move towards that next day. And the whole point is like, if you're not training for 2 weeks after this thing, you're probably going to be pretty stiff for a good little period here. So do what you can. Don't beat yourself up about it. You're not expected to recover in 24 hours from these races. You're not expected to recover in a week from these races. It really takes a long time to bounce back. So be patient.
For sure. I literally can't run for like 10 days. Like physically can't run because my leg's too sore.
Yeah.
So it's not, and it's just not everybody. Some people recover faster, and some people recover slow. But even using like the super shoes, I still couldn't really run for like a week after the race, just because my quads were so sore, my knees were just buckle.
Well, something interesting. I think Ryan Hopkins, who's our team Wilpers, one of kind of head strength coach, believed to be a genius, but he sent me this whole research article about how your muscles actually recover much faster than your tendons and ligaments. So I guarantee you felt it. You've definitely seen athletes that feel it. It's there. You get that call, and you're like, "I've recovered. I'm ready to go." You have to kind of at that point, like fundamentally know that no, you're not. You're still in that recovery process for weeks following that, and so it's okay. It's the exact perfect ideal time to like tool it back down. Just do something else for a while.
Yeah, for sure. Totally agree.
Well, I think we'll probably kind of end it there. Jason, thank you so much. It's actually a pleasure to chat. I feel like it's been a while with
It has been, yeah.
your newest family members. So it's nice to actually catch up. And, hopefully I'll see you here in a few weeks for New York City Marathon or surrounding some of our events.
I should be in for a marathon. I think I'm going to be able to get away just for enough time.
All right. Well, you heard it here first. If you want to meet Coach Jason in person, follow us for our New York City Marathon events. Otherwise, Jason, thanks so much. Thanks to everyone for watching and have a fantastic day.